Nandasha, Janajana Salakaya, Chakshuranmelitanyin Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Panchakapadubhischa, Kripasamdevacha, Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavijnamo Namaha. So, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm going to start a series of lectures this evening on the Sandarbhas of Srila Jiva Goswami. I want to share with you first, as a way of introduction, a verse from a newly released book on the Tattva Sandarbha by Satya Narayan Das, who was a student of Jiva Goswami and dedicated the majority of his life to studying his presentation and making it available in English. I'll read the English. One who has not undergone comprehensive study of Sandarbhas must struggle to assimilate the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. One who has studied Sandarbha, however, will have no misgivings about the essential meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the center of the Gaudiya Vaishnava universe when it comes to the essence of what is significance in understanding spiritual life. So Tattva Sandarbha is an introduction to the Sandarbhas, which have a total of 6, dealing with the 3 primary subject matters of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. The Tattva, the Bhagavat, the Paramatma, and the Krishna Sandarbha all deal with Tattva. Sambandha, the nature of the interrelationships. And the Bhakti Sandarbha deals with Abhideya, the practice which is utilized to transport us from the material realm to the spiritual realm of activity. And then the Priti Sandarbha is about the prayojan, the goal of practice. So Satya Narayan Das's Tattva Sandarbha, he says, Vaishnav epistemology and ontology. So epistemology. Anybody know the English well, it is English. Anybody know the definition?
The beginning of the knowledge.
Epistemology is the nature of knowledge, the nature of knowing. What is the means by which one knows? And ontology is
What is to be known?
Well, ontology refers to the nature of being. So the book is about the nature of knowledge in relationship to the nature of being. So what is the nature of knowledge when we want knowledge to relate to our being. And this is the one thing that we will find in Jiva Goswami's presentation is, as the Gaudiyas look at him, and now the world recognize him, we're talking about he is one of the greatest logicians of all time. His presentation is his understanding of knowledge and being, and his presentation of that is so penetrating that it cuts through all cultural and societal boundaries, which it should, because that is the nature of his masters. As he brings out in his opening prayers in the book, Mangalacharana, Srila Rupa and Sanatan are his masters. And his presentation and his logical analysis are there for spiritual seekers. So there is some qualification and he makes that apparent also in the very beginning of the book. This book is for spiritual seekers. Now we're going to be studying Tattva Sandarbha, which is the first of the 6 Sat Sandarbhas. We'll be referring to both Swami Tripurari and Satya Narayan Das's books, and they're different in the respect that Swami Tripurari's presentation is such that he's making the book available, and he's seeking out a broader audience. Even Jiva Goswami intended. And in doing so, he's trying to praise Jiva Goswami. If you think you understand knowledge, if you think you understand theology, if you think you understand the nature of being, you should acquaint yourself with the Sandarbhas of Jiva. So that's Swami's presentation, is he's reaching out to Westerners in particular, and the philosophers of the West, and saying, you can't really call yourself a serious philosopher when it comes to the nature of being, of the self, of consciousness, unless you've studied Jiva Goswami. Let me give you a little introduction. So he's given us his Tattva Sandarbha, presenting what's the essence of the book, because in the Tattva Sandarbha, we can see through to the remainder of the Sandarbhas. Now, Satya Narayan, he is giving us all the Sandarbhas in English. He's completed 3 already that are available. And he just re-released the Tattva Sandarbha in a new format and reworked the whole text. He'd done the Bhagavat Sandarbha, which is the 2nd of the 6. And the Bhakti Sandarbha, he's also presented, but he's going to be reworking that, because you can see he's presenting all the books from beginning through the 6 again. So what is this nature of knowledge? What is the nature of knowledge? What is the necessity of knowledge? What is the goal of knowledge? And why should we look and use whatever is available, what facilities are available to us to gain knowledge about the self? Of all things that are here, why should we care about the self? We're here, we're living, breathing, eating, Why should we look for anything more meaningful to life than the life that we're living today? That's the beginning of Tattva Sandarbha. What is the essence of our existence? You have to make a determination of what in life is attractive to you. What are you looking for? And Jiva Goswami is going to make a very strong argument that let me tell you what you should be looking for. And he opens the whole Sandarbha with a verse from Bhagavatam, which is the essence of what we should all be looking for. It's interesting. Again, we come to the fact that these acharyas basically unpack and present to us by fluffing out the knowledge that will capture our intellect. So the Tattva Sandarbha starts out with a verse from the 11th canto. Anyone want to venture a guess? The book is broken up into sections. The sections are referred to as anuchedas. It's a section which explains. He explains in the sections philosophical points. He brings out philosophical points. In the beginning, this Tattva Sandarbha, he deals primarily with fogging up. He deals primarily with where should we look for knowledge? And why should we look for knowledge about being? Where should we look? How should we look? And what should we base our inquiry on? Where should we give credit to the source of knowledge? And he, with all that in detail. But the start of the book begins with this verse. Krishna Varnam Tvasa Krishna. Sangopangastra Parsadam. Yajnai Sankirtana Prayar. Yajantihi Sumedasa. That's the beginning of his Sandarbha. The beginning of his Tattva Sandarbha. In there we have the essence of what the goal, what the knowledge of being should be, what the practice is, and what the goal is, all in one verse.
You said 11th canto, what?
11.532. In the age of Kali, the Supreme Absolute, Bhagavan, appears within this world with a non-black confection. Krishna Varnam Tvasa Krishna Parsadam. And constantly sings or describes the names of Krishna. The means is there. Abhideya. Accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. Those endowed with discriminating wisdom worship the Absolute in this form, primarily through sacrifice of the self in complete kirtan, involving the totality of one's being. So let's talk about being. Being, what this is really where it starts, is are we going to use our being to be a human being, or are we not? Because to be, by some observable inference, a difference between our being and the being of all the other beings that we are inhabiting this planet with. This is our experience. We have nothing more at this stage than our experience to begin with, correct? So we come into being and we recognize, well, I'm not alone here. There's people that look and are kind of like me, and then there's all these other entities that are different from me. And this is perceivable through my senses. I can see this. But I see that there is some real distinction here between me and all the other animals that I'm residing with. And I notice that all the other animals here, they're all surviving too, like I'm surviving. But all of us are surviving on what? On each other. None of us can survive without destroying another. That is life here. It's kill or be killed. You have to consume some other thing to survive. So jiva, one living entity is food for another living entity. But they're over and above that, the fact that we're all here and we all have these bodies, we can observe that we have some additional facility over and above this basic necessity. Some little additional facility. We have some intelligence where we can see, well, we can discriminate between what we want to eat and what we don't want to eat, and the way in which we eat it. But none of us will live hardly any time at all unless there is eating involved, and eating involves taking someone else. We can discriminate. We don't have to be violent in our consumption. But I notice all the other animals, they're impelled. They don't have the discrimination. They do not have that ability to discriminate against what they're going to eat and what they're not going to eat. They're impelled by nature, it seems, and certain of them eat grass in the field, and certain of them eat only other prey. Certain of them fly in the sky and live in the ocean, and in the ocean, the bigger ones eat the smaller ones, and the smaller ones eat the little, even smaller ones, till you get to the smallest ones, and they eat the plants. But there's all this consumption going on. So what's worth? We see this distinction, and we understand that we have that additional, a little different intellect, in that our lives are not fully consumed just by these instincts to survive. And with this little bit of extra intelligence, some questions may come up. Well, how did I get here? Where did I come from? What's my purpose? What is the nature of my being? What is it? This is the distinguishing factor between human life and animal life. And we look at life, when we look at being, and we think, why am I here? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? Do I have a purpose? And Why is it, in spite of my very best efforts, I'm never quite satisfied in my being here? It doesn't matter how much I try, I'm not fully nourished in this environment. I'm fed, I can keep the body alive, I can keep busy, I can engage in so many activities, but unless I begin this inquiry into the nature of my being, into my true self, and I head down that road of conscious inquiry, and I get some tangible result, I'm not satisfied in life. You know, you can meet materialists and they'll say, yeah, you're just crazier than a bat. You know, I mean, I'm happy, and, you know, but really, when we really cast off all the BS, they're not, and we're not. So that's where Tattva Sandarbha begins. Ontology. What is the nature of ourself? And if we're going to know ourself, upon what basis should that knowledge be? Where should we go to acquire that knowledge? What is the nature of knowledge? Where does it come from? How does it come? And, well, to begin with, we know that our primary source of knowledge is what? We see, we taste, we smell, everything that we experience in this world. It's coming in, and we're processing it, and we're giving it different degrees of importance. But your degree of importance for what you smelled and what I smelled is maybe entirely different. Your degree of warmth or cold, or your degree of pleasure, your type of all the sensory input that we have, not everyone's processing it the same. Why is that? What is the nature of this knowledge that isn't consistent throughout all experiencers? It seems to be very particularized. And you and I can walk away from the same experience with an entirely different viewpoint, and basically the experience itself. One person, two people can go to an opera, and one person will walk away and say, what was that all about, that screeching high? Oh, I couldn't even listen to it. What was that lady just, you know, singing her heart out to what? The guy's dying. I don't get it. And the other person's there, it's like, oh my, you didn't understand. She was in love and he died, and she was singing her heart out. It was broken. Well, that was what it was all about. Entirely different. Same experience. Or was it the same experience? So it seems that there's something else going on here, since your experience and my experience of the same event is not the same. Yours is black and mine is blue. Yours is white. I mean, there's a difference in what we perceive. And you can't say it's just that, well, you didn't understand it because you weren't wearing your glasses. You know, that's just part of it. There's the seeing, there's the smelling, there's the hearing, there's the whole thing, and then there's the process of that whole conglomerate of sensual input, and the whole overall experience is entirely different. Epistemology is, what are we going to base our knowing on? That is where Tattva Sandarbha begins. What are we going to base our knowledge on? Because it doesn't seem that in this environment, knowledge is consistently reliable across everyone that's coming in through the senses. It's not the same. People are seeing things differently, even though they have eyes, ears, nose, taste, smell, touch. It's all there, and it's all coming in, and it's being churned with a mind, an intellect, and the result is not consistent. So when we come to knowledge, how are we going to find a consistent knowledge where you and I agree that's knowledge? There has to be a standard of consistency in knowledge if it's based on being, and being is fact. If we're factually here, if we factually exist, if there are certain givens in existence, how are we going to get to that essence of existence, of being, in a factual way? That's where Tattva Sandarbha begins. How are we going to get there from here? Because from here, it's a traffic jam, and everybody's driving in a different direction. And once in a while, they bang into each other. Individually, societally, they have wars, they have debates, they have elections. They crash into each other with all their conflicting ideals of what is knowledge, what is knowable, and what is of significance. All full of conflict. So let's start Tattva Sandarbha. Jiva says, well, let's figure this out, because I want to know what is the nature of my being. And we got to start somewhere. So we have to start with a way of acquiring knowledge which is consistently reliable across humanity at large. We need to find a medium whereby we can agree on what is the nature of being. In order to arrive at that medium, we have to have a methodology that is consistently reliable. Now, it's agreed that not everyone's going to accept the same system. But Jiva, who is a tremendous logician, is going to try to convince us that there is an extremely reliable source of knowledge, which is utterly consistent, totally acceptable, and based on revelation, which far exceeds, which is one, consistent upon those that have had it. It's the same, and it's much superior. It's a much superior way to see what is the underlying nature and truth of our existence than the conflicting nature of empiric sensual observation. So this Tattva Sandarbha is, in looking at this presentation and trying to delve into what Jiva is giving here, what we find is we could think this is way, way above my head. Because as we go through it, as we begin to unpack what he's going to be presenting, we're going to go, how can he think these thoughts? I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around how's he arriving at this? And he's, you know, and I was thinking this, I did try to read the Sandarbhas earlier in life, and yeah, it seemed incomprehensible. What was available at that time to me was not of the nature of what's come now, but still it was extremely just amazing. And we'll notice as we go through this that the presentation it even pushes the boundaries of the English language, because the terminology of knowledge and the terminology of being and the terminology of what's presented in Sanskrit in the scripture is difficult, specifically difficult to put into a language that doesn't have the nuance that Sanskrit does. But we're going to start here. And I just want to go through a few questions, and I'm going to follow the recommendation of that's given in Satya Narayan's version of the Tattva Sandarbha. And where he begins there is he said, before one takes up a study of this book, one needs to understand some basic terms and concepts, because as we go through our study, these terms and concepts are going to come up repeatedly. So if we don't have the right conceptual orientation as to what these terms mean, then we're going to have a hard time assimilating the subject of Dharma. So this section is called the language of transcendence, key terms and concepts. So we'll begin when we're just going to walk through these. I think most of us have a pretty firm grasp of what these things mean when we hear them. We're going to make sure that our grasp is correct. And then we're going to go on into the presentation itself. So achintya. Anyone?
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable. To what?
To what?
Mm-hmm. When you say inconceivable.
To our mind and the senses.
Okay.
Unable to. You have two opposing things, and they happen at the same time.
Okay.
But simultaneous.
Okay. Okay. He gives a little bit deeper than that. Achinta, inconceivable, in that we can't reconcile it with our experience, I think is what you're saying. Is that right?
That's good, but that's not what I said.
Okay, go ahead.
No, that is correct.
Okay. So what he says, it's trans-rational. Trans, when he says trans-rational, he's meaning what? Beyond our rational comprehension of the way a thing could or should be. It's beyond our rational thinking. Inconceivable, as you said. Inconceivable to the way we think. But it's inconceivable in a specific way. It's beyond, as we're speaking, our what? Empiric sensual way of looking at an item. Beyond conventional logic, he says, and reason. But, and this is a very big but we can comprehend it within our thought processes. If so, it would be unimaginable. But it is imaginable. We can see a correlation between what we experience and what's trying to be conveyed through what we see in the scriptures presented as. So we have a way of grasping it in that we can make a comparison, but we understand it's beyond what we may have direct experience of. Let's have it for instance. When the scripture says samadhi, what do we know? We can relate to samadhi means entering into a realm of experience which is beyond my senses, but is real like what I have in my sensual experience. It's not something that's just a hallucination. It's not a dream. It's samadhi. It's something where I'm experiencing the nature of my being without what I think and I've always thought was my being. My eyes, my ears, my nose, there's a certain way I look in the mirror and I said, there I am. I be an old man or a young girl, or I be black or white, or I be the president, or I be a caddy on the golf course. I have a conception of what I am, and samadhi allows me to experience a real and deeper sense of my being. So I can wrap my mind around the concept of samadhi. Although what? It's achinta. It's beyond my direct experience, but somehow or other I can wrap my head around it.
Could part of it be that it's something that I could possibly experience at another time, but I'm not able to at this time?
Well, of course, it can have that aspect to it. It's inconceivable, but I can conceive that I could possibly understand it or experience it in a future time.
It seems like it's not inconceivable, but it's imperceptible. Because you just said we can conceive it. We can think of it.
It's right. It can come within my reasoning power, yes.
But we can't perceive it.
Through our normal, rational,
right,
empiric, sensual method of acquiring and processing knowledge. Trans-rational. It's a little bit beyond what I can, but I can under the scriptures. The transcendental sounds are so potent, it can give me a perception.
And then I can have faith that it's real and that other people have experienced it.
Well, faith is another thing. But it borders on faith because, yes, without faith in the source of that achinta, without that faith, you're a hard time processing it. Yeah, that's the nature of spiritual inquiry, is there has to be some faith, or there's be no reasoning. Oh, there'll be no acceptance of anything beyond what we can experience with our senses. The way that Sridhar Swami puts it is beyond the range of conventional or linear logic. Beyond what we know, a normal process of perception or thinking, it's beyond that, because we have a certain way through our knowledge gathering senses and the way we process that information of thinking this is the rational thing here. What I'm seeing is real. That's a mountain. That's an ocean. Then we go to the desert water and we say, what is the water doing in the desert? So then we have to rationally see beyond that and see, well, that's an illusion. My mind is projecting water where there is no water. And we notice that there's all kinds of optical illusions. I was on a computer and they were showing pictures of two celebrities, and you were to look at an X in between the two pictures, and they would switch the pictures. Now, when you were looking at the pictures without looking at the X in between with your eye, not focusing on it, you could just see, well, there's so-and-so and there's so-and-so, and they looked exactly normal. So then you concentrate on that little X right in the middle, and all of a sudden, they start to look like abstract caricatures. They're no longer in a human form. The mind friends. And Krishna's friends that are servant of the manjaris, well, that sounds pretty interesting. So you hear these things and you have. But there's one thing that all Gaudiya Vaishnavas are content on. They're fixed on. Vaikuntha is not a place for me. I have no interest in that. I want to enter into Vraj Bhakti. I may not know yet, I may not even have a firm ideal in that environment of Bhakti, how I'm going to relate or how I want to relate to Krishna. Maybe that's not fully firm, but Vraj Bhakti, just by hearing, we know Vaikuntha is not the place for me. I'm not really, the way I've seen and heard the Bhagavatam from my guru and from my Purva Acharyas in this line of disciplic succession, I don't want to really be in that environment. It's a nice place and I worship it. And I worship all the residents there and they're great lovers of Krishna, but really I want to be in the woods. If I'm going to be with God, I want to be in nature. And the closer to nature I can be, the closer I'll feel with God. And I'm not really going to feel that close in a palace. Be nice, and there'll be all these nice, they'll be serving him and he'll be happy and Lakshmi will be there. But I like that other ideal. That I know. Where did that come from? There's no one here in this assembly that's thinking any other way. I want to be with Vishnu. Anybody thinking that way? After a lifetime of hearing or lifetimes of hearing? It doesn't even, we worship it, we respect all those people that love it, but it's just not a flavor I'm interested in. How unique is that? That is what? How did that happen? That we can have this concept, association with the devotee. Where else did it come? I wasn't born wanting to make my life's goal living in Braj. No, I wasn't born into that society. It all came from association, all of it. And someday, some lifetime, way, way off in a different galaxy, I'll come to an understanding of, and this is how I want to play in that playground. Or maybe I'll be blessed sooner or later. It doesn't matter. What is the difference? I don't care. Liberation is so easy, and you can hear where you can just, Ajamil was liberated and entered into Vaikuntha, and all he did was chant Nama Bas, just a shadow reflection of the holy name. And it was enough, although he was a sinner. But I'd rather spend hundreds of lifetimes to go to that playground in the woods. Wow. What a concept. What a concept to have, to carry, to have that in your heart. Even if it's fuzzy, it's like a TV. You can't quite get it focused, and it's like, okay, let me hear the pastime again. Okay, let me look at the deities. Yeah, okay, they kind of look like that's God. Yeah, it's Radha. Okay, focus it, chanting. Yeah, I hear, I don't hear, I hear, I don't hear. But I have this concept. I've heard enough to know what? Braj Bhakti is for me, and nothing else is going to do it. This is, well, Golokare Premadan Harinam Sankirtan. This is what Lord Chaitanya came to give. This is not just handed out. That even
the lowest malechas and yamas can immediately grasp onto this concept, so much so that it's going to carry them to that destination sooner or later. And they don't care how loose, they don't really care sooner or later. What kind of concept is that? Nadinam najanam nasundarim. I don't care. Going up, going down, you know? So, Achinta, these concepts, Brahman, unqualified, non-dual, no duality in Brahman.
How about another one, Paramatma?
So we have Brahman, which is unqualified. It's spiritual substance without anything different between anything. It's like, well, we really don't even like it very much because there's no variety in it.
Then we come to Paramatma, the supreme indwelling self, or simply the supreme self. So now we come to another concept, a term, a terminology, which takes us deeper into understanding the absolute, understanding of spiritual. But now we have features. We're conceiving of that non-dual Brahman as having a characteristic which is similar to the characteristics of consciousness that we have. Understanding that there's existing, there's knowing, and there's enjoying. Satchitananda. So that's there. And when we come to the conscious level, I can relate with the absolute in that we have those similarities. And the Paramatma conception is the conception of the similarities are such that one is infinitesimal and one is infinite. Conditioned, but one can be liberated to the point of the same condition as the absolute. So we will continue next class and continue to walk through these terms and concepts before we enter into, just so we understand when they come up, what do we mean? What's the author mean here? Then we'll go into the Mangalacharna. We'll understand what is actually a Sandarbha. What is it? What is its nature? It's bringing out the essence of a major presentation, major literature, by taking the essential points of that literature and analyzing them. And we'll soon make it to be understood as a common basis for knowledge that can be arrived at and used so that we can all make it to that same spiritual goal. To have a common ground of understanding that, just as I said, we have an understanding now that's coming from Sabda Brahman, from transcendental sound vibration. And that's influenced us in a way where we
have fixed a goal in spiritual life, a common goal based on that source of knowledge. So how does the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition arrive at the topmost evidence when it comes to making informed decisions and understandings in relationship to spiritual life? And this whole Satsandarbha, the whole treatise of Satsandarbha, is to bring us to the point where everything is seen in relationship to one literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, the cream and the essence of all spiritual sound vibration. So I've gone over. I'll stop there. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Vaishnavi